Hey everyone, I wanted to get on and update you guys about what's going on with our next steps before we do our next frozen embryo transfer because things are not going as planned. So I just wanted to update you guys on what that was, and those of you who may be new, welcome, and please I'll probably put some links down in the description of some previous videos, but you can just go back to my channel and see our whole experience so far with IVF and what we've gone through. We have gone through up to a frozen embryo transfer, which did end up failing. And so now we're in this waiting period for a next frozen embryo transfer. We have 2 embryos left, so yeah, we kind of wanted to, make sure we did maybe a few different things for the next transfer. But like 2 videos back, I talked about our next steps and what our plan was, and that we were going to do the ERA test, and then we're going on a trip to Spain and Portugal, and then when we get back from Spain and Portugal, we'll do another frozen embryo transfer. And hopefully, maybe the ERA test will show something. But for those of you who are not familiar, an ERA test is like the endometrial receptivity analysis. And the idea is that you basically prepare your body like you would for a frozen embryo transfer, but the day that you would do a transfer, they actually do a biopsy of your endometrial lining. And then they test it to make sure that it is receptive at that time. Because some people maybe need 12 or 24 more hours of progesterone or less hours of progesterone to make sure that endometrial lining is receptive when the embryo is put in. And a lot of times, people, that is the right time for people and they don't really need shifting, but sometimes it does come back where, the timing hasn't been exactly right. And typically I think most people, I guess it depends on the person, but I feel like maybe most doctors would do that test if there's been multiple failed embryo transfers, and we've only had 1 fail. But we also only have 2 embryos left, so we don't have a lot of embryos to work with unless we do, another egg retrieval. So anyway, that was the plan, was to do an ERA test while we wouldn't have been able to jump into a frozen embryo transfer after the one that failed last time. For one thing, just emotionally and physically and mentally, I just don't know if I could have jumped right into another one. And also just timing wise, I guess we could have, but if it did work and we were pregnant, we would have needed to take the progesterone and oil shots and all that stuff with us to Europe. And I think some people do it, but for me, I just wasn't really comfortable with doing that. So I was like, well, we'll just wait till we get back, and then it'll just be a little bit less stuff to worry about. And so while we were waiting, it was like, well, we can't do another transfer, but we do have time to do this ERA test. And so we were just kind of like, well, yeah, since we're waiting anyway, let's just go ahead and do it. And, my doctor said that for him, about 9 times out of 10, it comes back where there needs to be no change. I think if you get on the, some other statistics will say like 25% of women need things shifted. So anyway, it's not like a huge percentage of women that would need things shifted. And so yeah, but we just decided, we might as well do it since we got to wait anyway. And this would be, just something to kind of check that, because it's, I think it's definitely worth checking. And that's what we thought. And so anyway, I was preparing everything. I was on the estrogen pills, and I went in to have my lining check because they basically do the same thing as they would for frozen embryo transfer, where they want to check and make sure that lining is nice and thick and is responding to the estrogen, that your estrogen is at the right level it needs to be. And also that your progesterone is at the right level, because before you actually start taking the progesterone, they want to make sure your body is not already producing it or increasing it. So they want to make sure progesterone is less than 1 before you actually start taking the progesterone and oil. So I went and everything was fine. My lining was thinner than last time actually. When we did the frozen embryo transfer, it was 8 point something. I don't remember. No. 9.4 maybe? Something like that, which was great. And this time it was a 7 millimeter. So, I mean, they said it was still good, but, it definitely was thinner than last time. But anyway, my estrogen came back normal, but my progesterone came back at 1.7, and it needs to be under 1. So they said it looks like that my body is trying to ovulate, even though I took birth control before the estrogen. I was taking the estrogen. You're not supposed to kind of suppress that, but it looks like my body was trying to do that, and they basically said we have to cancel because it'll just throw everything off. So, because during a medicated frozen embryo transfer, they want everything manually controlled. They don't want your body taking over and adding extra or something like that. They want to be able to control it. So that was kind of not expected. So anyway, I was like, man, and I was looking at the timing and everything, because basically they want me to try, they said we could try again, and instead of doing birth control before the estrogen, we would do Lupron before the estrogen, and that should help to make sure that my body doesn't ovulate. So the timing of everything, I talked to my nurse, talked to my doctor, and it will not work before we go to Spain. So anyway, we basically are kind of trying to decide what we're going to do next, because it means that I guess if we do want to move forward with this test, then we would have to do it after we get back from Spain, which will just kind of keep pushing things further and further along. And I mean, I know we've already been waiting for over 5.5 years, so waiting, another 6 weeks or something to do this test before we can start the process for another embryo transfer is not like that long in the grand scheme of things, but in the moment and in the present, it feels long. And it's just, again, it's not this for sure certain thing that it's like, yes, you probably have endometrial lining problems. My doctor said that he thinks it's mostly to do with the embryo, because I do have low AMH. I have a slightly elevated FSH, and he said he kind of correlates that with potential embryo quality issues. So his suggestion was leaning more towards transferring 2 embryos, and that's all we have left is 2. So yeah, I'm just not sure. And I guess I'm kind of leaning more towards, let's just transfer those 2. We're gonna include a endometrial scratch this time, and to change things up, and probably transfer those 2. Because the only reason why I was thinking I might not want to do 2 is if the ERA test came back and it was like, yes, for sure we need to shift things. Then I would probably be like, well, let's just do 1 then, because maybe that was the whole problem. Now our 2 embryos are day 6 blast. The first embryo transfer we did was a day 5 blast, but these are day 6, which I've heard can potentially, they may not be quite as good quality. Now the grading, the look of them looks good. They look like good quality embryos, but maybe it just because it took them a day later to get to that stage, they may not have enough cell energy to keep on developing, so they may not be that great quality. We don't know. We really don't know. And we didn't do any PGS testing or anything like that. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, is that when we get back from Spain, that we just kind of move forward with another frozen embryo transfer of those 2. And then if for some reason that fails, then we're not kind of pushing another egg retrieval further along, because since I do have low AMH, it just will keep decreasing. It doesn't go back up. As you get older, it keeps decreasing. And I am going to turn 34 very soon, June 8th. So, I know that as long as you're under 35, you're young or something, but I'm definitely getting close to 35. So, and my AMH definitely is more similar to that of an older woman. So yeah, that's what we're thinking, is that just kind of skipping the ERA test, since it kind of didn't work in this waiting window that we were hoping it would work in. I don't know if that's, you know, I talked to my doctor about it, and he was supportive either way, really. But I think he was saying he leans more towards thinking that it was more of an embryo issue versus a lining issue. So that's what we're thinking. I know everyone has probably different opinions about it. I know some people have done their ERA test, and it's like, that's the reason why we're pregnant, and that very well may be something we would need to look into in the future. Definitely, if this fails, I would probably want to do that before we did another transfer. But that's where we are now, not where we thought we would be. But thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you for watching. And yeah, we had our delay. I've actually thankfully never experienced that through this process. You know, we've had some things that could potentially be delays, but then we were able to move forward with our timeline. Like, if you go back and look at my videos, but most of it has been able to stick with the schedule that they projected, which I know is not always common. Like, there's definitely times where people like, well, we can't do it this cycle because your levels aren't at this, you know, aren't correct, and or your lining is not thickening, or you only have a few follicles, so we're not gonna do egg retrieval or whatever. Thankfully, everything has kind of gone to as planned, except for this. And you know, it wasn't too, I mean, it was kind of disappointing because we did want to just kind of cover our bases and do that test, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad to just be off the hormones and not have to do progesterone and oil, like, you know, and it's really not that bad, but just having to deal with that is not the most fun thing. So I was kind of like, okay, yeah, we'll just get off all those hormones and just be done with it for now. So anyway, yeah, that's what's going on with us right now. So, but yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one. Again, I'd love to hear any feedback, any stories of what you guys have experienced. I know we're all different, so no one has the same experience, but it's always kind of good to hear you're not alone, for sure. So anyway, see you guys. Bye.